Hi, my name is Lindsay. I am the Associate Dean of Students here at Covenant and a licensed professional counselor in the state of Missouri. And I've been asked to talk a little bit today about cultivating a non-anxious presence. Um, I'm by no means an expert, so I will be referencing many people who are actually experts. I have, as the associate dean, as a therapist, spent many hours sitting with people, and probably more importantly, have had many people pour into me, sit with me in this non anxious attending way that I'm going to talk about today. So, hopefully, we can give you an idea of what I mean by non anxious presence and a few ways that you can begin to cultivate this and why it's important as someone potentially going into the ministry, being called as a teacher, counselor, pastor in ministry. So, what I mean when I say non-anxious presence is really just the ability to attune to someone, to listen well without kind of your stuff, your feelings, your anxieties, whatever may be going on for you in the moment, getting in the way of being able to sit with and stay with what's happening for another person. Kurt Thompson is an interpersonal neurobiologist and a believer, and he says we are born looking for someone who is looking for us. So we all have this desire, this design to be seen, to have a felt sense of being known. And the gift of a non anxious presence is that we can offer that to people when they're in distress. And it can be a powerfully healing experience. It's also really helpful because we're having our own responses. You know, we're in the middle of a pandemic. There's so many things happening in our world today that are tragic and intense, and we're carrying all of those things into these interactions. And so, cultivating a practice of a non-anxious presence can be really helpful for both us and for the people that we're sitting with. Um, to just allow us to be a person with a person. We tell our counseling students and other students that it's good to be in a room with you. And our dean of counseling is going to talk a little bit more about some of those things. Um, but I'm going to move in a little bit to talking about ways that you can cultivate this non-anxious presence, this ability, this skill to sit with people and kind of stay with what's going on for them. The first is just to know your own story. Um, when we're anxious, our brain wants to make sense of it. It wants to tell a story that allows us to kind of categorize and put it into the boxes and make us feel better. And it will pull information from a lot of places, our stories, our histories, and environmental cues, lots of different things. And it doesn't always know what is relevant to what's actually happening. And so understanding your story and the roots of where you might tend to respond anxiously, or you might tend to respond in a heightened way, is helpful so that you can keep your focus on what's happening for the other person in the moment. Um, there are a couple of ways to begin doing this. Peter Scazzaro wrote a book called The Emotionally Healthy Church, and in it he talks about kind of breaking the power of the past. And one of my favorite kind of heading titles is Remember How Many People Are at the Table. So when you're sitting with someone or you're sitting with a group of people, each of those people is bringing in a family system, is bringing in a set of people that have contributed to who they are. And as are you. And so being able to attune to that, being able to know kind of what you're bringing in is really going to help when anxiety is at play. And it takes practice to be aware of these things and to understand kind of where all of the things are coming from. So um, that book, Peter Scazzaro's book, Emotionally Healthy Church, is a great place to start learning some of those things about your own story and how they impact your leadership and kind of growing and listening and being a non-anxious presence. Dan Allender also has some great resources to start exploring this. His To Be Told book, Cry of the Soul and Healing Path are common ones that you'll see at Covenant. Um, Another thing to consider when you are looking to cultivate a non-anxious presence is your reactions. So when your anxiety is at play or whenever your heightened emotion is at play, beginning to notice how you tend to show up when those things are happening for you. For example, when you're anxious, do you tend to people please? Do you tend to revert to perfectionism? Kind of lock down and try and control the interaction. Or maybe you go in the opposite direction. Maybe you become passive or you avoid. Sometimes it can even show up as sort of a shadow side of um, a, a good and genuine desire to help. We can be doing it to avoid our own pain or make meaning of our own suffering. Um, and it can drive us to sort of see people as projects instead of um, people to be people with and people to be in relationship with. And research and scripture would support that the relationship is really the key component to healing and support. And so Dr. Thompson, that I mentioned earlier, wrote a book called The Soul of Shame. And that was one that helped me personally really understand when my anxiety is at play or when my anxiety is interacting with shame. I get prickly, I get tense, I get defensive in relationship. And so when that happens, when I'm reacting that way, I know that there's something going on for me. And I need to attend to that within the context of my relationship with the Lord. Um, and that piece of it reminds me of a way to sort of cultivate this non-anxious presence is that it needs to be rooted in our relationship with the Lord. So our ability to offer relationship is dependent on our identity and our connection in our own relationship with the Lord. Dr. Richard Winter is the director emeritus of our counseling program here at Covenant, and he wrote a book called Perfecting Ourselves to Death, in which he says we can rest in that deep security and know that we have significance in being made in his image and being a child of God, saved by his grace, not by anything that we have done or earned. At the deepest level, understanding and experiencing God's grace is the key to unlocking the prison of perfectionism. And I think that applies to many things, whatever kind of things you uncover, whatever reactions you tend to have when anxious or heightened. The key to unlocking those things is to understand and experience God's grace for yourself. And that way we can have confidence in our status as beloved children, and we can set aside our protective responses and remain curious and remain open to what's going on for the other person and staying with what's happening. Um, One kind of final way to begin cultivating this sense of a non-anxious presence is to be aware of your actual presence. Emotions are physical. We're always kind of communicating and passing signals about our emotions back and forth to one another, and being able to cultivate a moment of calm, being able to notice when that's happening for you and invite through prayer the Spirit of the Lord to be in that moment for you. Tim Keller has this great sermon called Praying Our Fears, in which he talks about a third way of dealing with our anxiety. Culture might want us to sort of just express and vent with abandon. Religiosity might want us to sort of power through and just, knuckle down and get it done, deny what's going on for us or avoid. But the third way is actually to pray them back to the Lord, to invite Him to those moments of anxiety. And he demonstrates in the Psalms. I do this often when I'm feeling anxious in a moment or I'm feeling pressure to respond in a certain way, even as I'm interacting with someone. And so being able to ask for help, being able to slow down and ask the Lord to remind me that He's the one at work and He knows what they need. And so I don't need to worry about saying the right thing or doing the right thing, but I can just be a person with a person, and the Spirit of the Lord will be connecting us. So these are just a couple of thoughts. Hopefully they get you thinking and considering this for yourself. I look forward to engaging some of your questions in the future. Thanks so much.